everybody, Gina DeLuca here. Okay, we're going to be going for some Boulder cell action today, and the colors I'm using for my background slash base coat, I have Liquitex Basics in Quinacridone Magenta, Phthalo Blue, and I have the Decoart Americana Decor Satin Enamels in Pure White. This is just the magenta by itself. This is a combination of the satin enamel and the phthalo blue. So this is about 50% satin enamel, 50% phthalo blue. This one, I actually added a bit of the Artist Loft white. And it really only takes like a drop of phthalo blue to tint it that much. It is such a strong pigment. A little bit goes a very, very, very long way. So this was mostly the Satin Enamel Pure White and the Artist Loft white with just like a drop of phthalo blue to give it that blue hue. These paints have been mixed 1 part paint to 2 parts Floetrol, and that mixture is then thinned. You can use water, or I like to use 90% water, 10% Floetrol mixture. And I'll show you on the light one because that usually shows up better. And this is the consistency we're looking for. This is a 2 on my consistency scale. It does make a mound, but it disappears very quickly. It comes off of the stick in a very nice, even stream. If it's not coming off evenly, if it's kind of wobbly, you need to mix it some more. Before we get started, have you seen the Fluid Art inspiration cards? If you have, you can fast forward about a minute, but if you have not, what we have are 52 cards. There are 42 technique cards, and each technique card has an associated video here on YouTube that gives you all of the information that you need, the exact paint brand, color, consistency, the recipe, of course, the technique, all of the things that I can't fit onto a card. This is a picture of the painting in that video. This box contains a tip for that particular technique, and here at the bottom, you have the color palette that was used in that painting. And then these 2 boxes can be used together as the basis of a 2-color palette, or you can build off of those. And there are 8 bonus color palette cards. Each one has 5 color palettes. You can use all of the colors or just some of the colors. Mix and match the bonus color palette cards with the technique cards, and you have more combinations than you could ever paint in a lifetime. These are available at my website, ginadeluca.net, and also at amazon.com. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is put some paint in my cup. Do about 2 ounces in there. I like to put it in there first so I make sure that I have enough for my pour. I have gone a little short before. The reason I use a base coat is because I want these paints to slide around evenly and easily, smoothly across my canvas. If I pour onto a dry canvas, something has to stick to the canvas first. And that is going to be the paint that hits the canvas first. So as you're tilting, that's going to be the paints that are on the edge of your puddle. And then the paints that are in the center of your puddle are going to roll over the paints that are on the edge of your puddle. So I like to use a base coat. I find it to be very helpful, and you will notice that I have already covered my edges of my canvas, and I do this because when I am using Floetrol and when I mix as thin as I do, it may not stick to the sides as well, and then you kind of have some canvas showing through, and that's not pretty, and it's kind of a pain in the tuchus to go back and try to fix that later, especially if you are using custom blended colors. Now you have to try to match that color or paint your sides a solid color. This way, my edges are covered no matter what my poured paint does, and I do not have to go back and fix it later. I like to troubleshoot before there is trouble. And I like to do as little in the way of touch-ups as possible. Okay, going to hit this with the torch and pop any bubbles that may be in the base coat so that they don't pop up through my pour later on. All right, going to start with the darkest blue first. I'm going to pour from up high. I want these paints to sink and churn in there. These colors look very cool together. It has a very glowing effect. That is something that I try to achieve in my paintings, is a glow. And much of that has to do with color choices. But also, technique will help with that as well. How it gets layered in your cup, it all makes a difference. Every single thing that you do different makes a difference in this art form. I'm going to take what is ever left in my cup here and go over top. The Decoart Satin enamels, the whole Decoart Americana line basically, they dry matte, and matte paint will create cells when used with a glossier paint. Typically, I use an opaque for my background, but this magenta is actually pretty glossy in comparison, so it should still work. It looks like it's working in the cup. So let's make a mess, shall we? I'm just going to let this pour straight for a minute and then do some very slow rings. I really do kind of want some of those little fingerling type formations going on in there. As I get closer to the end of my cup, I will get closer to the canvas. This will give me more control. And now, as I get towards the end of my cup, I have that lightest color. The last color that goes in often, usually, ends up at the very bottom of my cup. And that is what gives me that glowing effect. If I'm using a darker background, I want the lightest color in the center. And if I'm using a light dark background, I want the darkest color in the center. And so that typically winds up being the last color that I put into my pouring cup. Okay, now I'm going to let this sit. I'm going to let this paint puddle percolate. And what's going to happen is there are little tiny air bubbles in this, the way that it's poured. That is just going to happen naturally. And as they come up to the top, they are bringing the Decoart paint with it. And the Decoart paints are hydrophobic, which means it's pushing the other paint away. And those cells will get bigger. They will expand as they are allowed to come up. Patience is a virtue when it comes to Boulder cells. I could have stretched this right away and I will get cells. But if I allow this to sit first and allow those cells to come up and do what they're going to do, then I stretch them, then I get those big 3D cells. If I stretch it and then the cells pop up after, that's when you get the pearl cells. I call them pop-up cells because they pop up after you've stretched. The Boulder cells you allow to pop up before you stretch, and then you get this awesome 3D effect. When you use, like I used 2 colors that were in the same color family, just, you know, a lighter shade of it. That's what gives it that very cool 3D effect, because you wind up with shadows and highlights. So that is part of my color choice decision making. So you can see more are popping up, and these, if I just allow these to grow, if I am patient, those will become Boulder cells instead of pop-up cells. And they will have a very cool 3D effect. And sometimes I like to put it on a spinner because I like a very uniform stretch. And sometimes I want a more organic, kind of flowy, bendy looking thing happening. And that's what I want today. I want a more organic flow to it. It kind of gives it more of like an undulating type effect. If I were doing a pure spiral, then I would want this on a spinner so I can just have it uniformly spread out. And I know a lot of folks like to fast forward through this part, but I feel it's really important for you to see just how long I'm actually letting this sit. And the patience that it's going to require. If you want to get these big juicy Boulder cells, little patience is required. It's not too bad, right? It's like less than a half an hour from beginning to end. You're going to let this sit for 5 to 7 minutes ish. You know, walk away for a minute if you need to, switch your laundry over, whatever it takes to maintain the patience. Occupy yourself in another way. So you'll notice now I'm only torching over here. I don't want anything else popping up over there, just here. So when I see the bubbles, I just pop them quickly. Okay, I think this is good. I do, hope I maintain some negative space because that's going to really give it that color pop there. So, going to see where the weight of my paint is. The weight of your paint is going to be wherever the paint is moving the fastest. Okay, I'm going to go... I'm going to go this way first. I want that side to stretch. And we're going to be patient in the tilt. There is no reason to whip this paint around your canvas. The slower you go, the more control you're going to have, the easier it is to keep an eye on everything that's going on in your painting. So I'm just going to come across to this opposite corner. Very, very patiently. And now I'm going to bring the weight of the paint back to the center of the canvas. Just watching where it's moving the fastest. So I bring the weight of the paint back to the center before I change directions. And this is going to help keep the shape of my cells better, so they don't get all squished up. And you can see when you control your paint, you can be pretty precise about where it's moving. Okay, the last corner always takes the longest. The first corner and the last corner, those are the two that require the most patience. And you can almost make corners if you are very mindful about controlling your paint. Okay, now, grab a little something for that corner there. You just take some of your drips if you miss a corner. You just touch it up. Alrighty, so now I want to adjust my focal point, adjusting the composition. So my focal point is going to be my center. If you are aware of the rule of thirds, it's almost there. The rule of thirds would be if you were to divide this canvas into 9 boxes. Thirds, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Unless your piece is symmetrical, like when I do a spiral, I want my focal point to be right in the center. But if it is not, it's kind of more interesting to the eye if it falls within an intersection of your crosses. So for this would be almost there, but I just want to shift it a little bit, just a bit. Paying attention to the weight of my paint so I can make that happen. Got to make sure that the weight of my paint is toward the center, so that's what moves. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, there we go. So, yay, I got to keep some of that magenta. Hopefully it stays that way. Got some beautiful blending going on in here. Really, really pretty. Some purple hues from that magenta blending. Some really cool layering going on in these Boulder cells. Really, really interesting cell formations here. So I'm gonna let this sit for a minute and I'm gonna bring you in for a close-up. Back in a few. Okay, here it is. It has that wonderful glow that I go for. I just find that to be so fascinating. When that happens, it looks like it is lit from behind. Check out these groovy cells, like layers. Really, really cool stuff happening in this one. Very 3D. Very glowy. Definitely pleased with this one. If you would like to get your hands on these magic cell making paints from Decoart, you can go in the description box. There is a link, a coupon code, but also if you use that link, I receive a small commission at no additional cost to you. I am an affiliate. So that is always appreciated. A great way to give back without costing you anything extra. And they always have more color options available on their website than you typically find in the store. Also in the description box, you'll find links to my PayPal tip jar if you feel so inclined, my website where you can find my art and music and the fluid art inspiration cards for sale, the link to my Patreon if you want to join over there, and our Facebook group, Go Make Some Art. Join us there, post your masterpieces, ask your questions, get some inspiration. A good time is had by most. It is the internet after all. But there it is. Lovely, glowing piece. That's it for me for today, y'all. I have to get ready for a gig. I hope y'all have a beautiful day. Now go make some art.